Hi everyone, thanks for joining our QuestCast today. This is about behind the scenes application reading. My name is Erin. I'm a program associate here at QuestBridge. I have a couple of colleagues of mine here. So first I want to cover some logistics for the Hangout. We will be answering your questions. We won't be able to get to all of them because we already know that there are a lot that have been asked already. If you want to submit a question, you can do so on the right-hand side of your screen. We also encourage you to upvote other questions that you see that have been submitted that you want to hear the answer to. So as soon as they get upvoted to the top, we'll see them much more quickly and we'll be able to get around to them. I also want to emphasize the theme of this QuestCast. So you might be a little confused about what we're actually talking about today. Application reading is a very general term. What we're going to be doing actually is we're going to be going through each section of the application and telling you our perspective as application readers and what we like and what we don't like when we read those sections of the application. So what we'll be doing is we'll be sharing tips for how you can make that section of the application really stand out when we're reading it. So with that, we're going to introduce ourselves. As I said before, my name is Erin. I am a program associate here at QuestBridge. I'm also a Quest Scholar. I graduated from Northwestern. And a fun fact about applications is that I have read probably over 450 applications, as well as filling out my own application.
My name is Tara. I'm the director of the student relations team. And let's see, I think I've read about 750, maybe 800 applications here at QuestBridge. Yeah.
My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm a program associate here on our partner relations team, and I've read, I think, close to 1,000 now, probably.
Okay. Yeah, so we've each seen quite a few applications. I mean, we also know because of that there are many ways to put together a very successful application. There's no one right or wrong way. But I think we do have some tips for how you can put together a better application. So with that, let's kind of think about some overall things that you think students should know as they're filling out the application.
I think it's really important to keep in mind as you're filling out the application. We know it's a very tedious process and there are a lot of fields that you need to fill out, but remember that this is the only way that we can get to know you. You know, we don't have an opportunity really to meet all of you face to face or have any kind of in-person interaction with you, so it's really important that you are telling us about yourself and sharing with us the most important and relevant information about your background and your personal circumstances, your unique situation, so that we have all the information that we need when we're reading your application and evaluating it.
I like to say I want to remember you. So I want to walk away from that application remembering your name and remembering your story. Make it memorable. Put yourself really into that application so that we do remember you.
Yeah. I think another kind of logistic side of things is that you should be using proper punctuation and complete sentences throughout the application.
Please.
So that means, yes, definitely in the short answers, definitely in the essays, but also if you're filling in any additional information sections about maybe additional information about the income of your parents, use full sentences there, use proper punctuation. That really helps your application come together.
Yeah, and if you're finding that you're running out of room in those sections specific to the household or the income section, you can always use the larger additional information section that gives you a more character or word count, and you can always fill in more and write more there as well.
Going back a little bit to the punctuation, definitely don't abbreviate things in that. So none of the abbreviations that you would probably text to your friends. And also, one thing that I think we all notice is oftentimes students will forget to capitalize the I when they're talking about themselves. Please capitalize the I.
Yeah, it's just a tiny thing, but maybe if your browser doesn't catch grammar mistakes, you could copy and paste things into a Word document to catch all those little errors. That'd be a good.
Right,
it's a great idea.
Yeah. And we encourage you to use your application proof. So that's on your manage or your review page when you are ready to submit your application. You can take a look to see what we see when we're reading your application. So you can make sure that no text is cut off, that all the punctuation and the periods and exclamation marks are all there, just so that you have a very polished application that you're sending, that we're reading, and also that our partner colleges are reading as well.
We actually have a question here that ties into the point that Tara was making, and that is when reading the essays, what makes someone memorable? So speaking to that point,
It's a really good question. I would have to say just a good story. So when you're talking about your own personal life, talk about yourself. I know it's really easy to talk about how your mother, your father, your grandparents have really influenced you, and then you start talking about their lives. Bring it back to you so that we remember you and not necessarily your entire family history.
I think I would also add authenticity. I think sometimes it's easy to keep revising your essay so much that you lose your own voice, and it seems like you try too much. So keep your own voice in there. That's really going to stand out. Okay, so let's move on to like the household and family details part of the application, thinking about how you can make that application kind of the best it can be. When you're reading applications, Tara and Vanessa, are there any like parts of that that you see students filling out and you're kind of frustrated by that, or you think they could have done it in a better way?
Go for it. Okay. One of the things that we see from time to time is under the your parents' like employment information. A lot of students under the industry will fill out, I don't know, or under their title they'll fill out, I don't know. And we think that, again, kind of alluding to that, what I was saying earlier, it's really important that we have all the information about you and about your family and that context as much as possible. So, do your best to try and guess what that is. If you're not quite sure about what their job title is, you can always kind of Google it, look up their industry, where that fits into. There are a lot of resources online through Google that you can just easily type in and kind of guess what that might be. And even in the additional information section, you can explain that. You can say, I'm not quite sure what my mom or my dad does, but this is kind of my best estimate. And that really can go a long way in helping us review your application.
Sort of moving on from there to the household number is really important to us. We want to know how many people are living in your household. That being said, read the instructions on the application. We do realize this is a really long application. There are quite a lot of instructions there, but they're there to help you and to guide you. And it's difficult for us to look at the household section and really gauge the income and the household if that number is incorrect. So be sure that you're double checking that and you're reading the instructions so you know just how many people to put in that little box.
Yeah, especially for the household members, because if we're trying to figure out exactly how many people are in the household, if you filled out that section in an odd way, that we're trying really hard to understand what's going on so that we can evaluate your income correctly. So it's really to your benefit to read those directions really fully to make sure you give an accurate representation of your household situation. I would also add that there's the option to check if one of your siblings is a Quest Scholar. Yeah. And if you have a sibling who's applying to the college match at this point in time, they aren't a Quest Scholar yet. So just only check that if you have a sibling who is in college or I suppose has graduated who is a Quest Scholar. Okay. Yeah, the household income is pretty straightforward because it is a lot of numbers. The other sections are sections where we see a lot more room to really kind of improve and stand out. So let's move on to the academic section. Any things you see that kind of like pet peeves with the academic section?
It's really important that if you have a copy of your unofficial or even official transcript that you're looking at it when you're filling out your 12th grade coursework section and be as accurate as possible. That doesn't mean that you need to type in every course name word for word exactly as how you see it on the transcript, but make sure that it's understandable, that we can understand what that class is. So if your school happens to abbreviate a class, for example, like AP US History, and it's abbreviated AP US H, some people might not know what that is, and it'll take us a second to really kind of for that to click with us. So you can write just AP and then US History. That would be really helpful when we are looking at your application.
And if it is a class that might not be a common class, maybe it's only offered at your high school or it's a very unique class to what you're studying, in the additional information section, describe it to us. Let us know what it is that you're studying. It's always nice to see a little bit of a description of that if it is a unique class.
Right, and especially if you're taking a class at a local community college or something like that, those classes tend to vary a lot. So it'd be really helpful for us to see more information about that.
I think one thing that I see often is students labeling classes as honors or college level when that's not reflected in their transcripts. And it's really important, even if you're taking a class that might, be at a higher level at your high school, unless it's considered an honors level or a college level course, then you don't need to mark it as such when you're entering that information. You should only mark it as such if it's technically considered that way by your high school.
Moving to the testing section there. So in the academic section here, a lot of people have been asking recently. I don't have test scores yet. I'm going to take them in October, or I have test scores and I'm also taking some in October. Please put your future test dates in there so that we see that you are registered and that you're planning on taking it. And I'm sure a lot of you are taking the prep courses, so we want to know that you're doing that.
Relating to test scores, we have a ton of questions here about test scores and how much they weigh into our decision process. So what I would say to that is that we do have a holistic review process, and the definition of holistic means that we don't weight parts of the application. So there's not an easy answer to that because we look at all parts of the academic section together, and we know that each student's situation is very different. So I think do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, and I think, kind of following what Erin was saying, because every family and every student situation is so different, it's really important, again, that we have all of the information that you can provide. So if you've taken the test, SAT or the ACT multiple times, be sure to submit all of those scores. We want to see all of the scores that you have taken, even if maybe in 10th grade you took the ACT and it was a little bit lower, but you did significantly better in 11th grade. I mean, that's huge for us. If you've improved, we want to see that, and we definitely take that in consideration in our evaluation process.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Let me see. Another thing I really want to point out is that this year, especially, the transcript is absolutely required. So if we do not have your high school transcript, we don't know what courses you took throughout high school, and we're not able to review your application with all the information, you absolutely must submit the transcript from your high school. It's very important.
And it can be unofficial. So if your counselor or your high school doesn't have the official one ready, that's okay. It's an unofficial one is okay. I've seen some students submit screenshots of their official transcript, and that's fine as long as we can see your name and all of the classes and grade levels very clearly. So that's really important to keep in mind if that's something that you're doing, taking a screenshot. You must make sure that everything is legible.
And you can check that, like we said before, check on your review page to see that that's been submitted, and then check your application proof. And I think we'll probably say this over and over again throughout the next hour. Check your application proof so that you can make sure that those uploads are there.
Yeah, and if for some reason maybe your counselor uploaded your transcript and you're not seeing it showing up, you can always send us an email and we'll double check that for you to make sure that's in your application. Because again, that is very, very important. I can't stress enough how important it is that you submit your transcript in some form with the application. Thinking about honors. You guys have any advice for filling out the honors section?
I was just gonna say that for your honors, oftentimes you have the same honor every year. Go ahead and list that once with all of your years there. So starting maybe with your freshman year, you were in the National Honor Roll, and you still are. That's great, but you don't have to write it every single year. You can use those spaces for other honors.
Yeah, so just in like the title of your honor, you can put any
parentheses or something.
Yeah, perfectly fine, especially if you want to save space for others.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who have national honors, definitely list those. State honors, those are all really important to us as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you don't have national honors, that's fine as well.
It's all right.
Don't worry about it. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about testing, because I think we probably have some other things to say about it. Yeah. So I know like some of you guys might be doing screenshots for your testing, and that's perfectly fine. That's really great. If you're doing a screenshot of your entire computer window, you do want to make sure to crop it. Just, we aren't distracted when we're looking at it. We only see the relevant information. Just, it's a good tip.
Do make sure your name is on it. We want to make sure that when you do it, you don't crop your name off. We want to know that those test scores are yours.
Okay.
Let's move on to the activity section.
When you're listing your activities, there's a drop-down menu that asks you to kind of rank your activity from 1 through 6, and whatever you rank as number 1 will show up first on that section of your application. So really be mindful of that. Think through all of the activities that you are a part of, that you participate in, and really be thoughtful about what you put as number 1 and the ranking order, because that is what we'll see at the very top of that section.
Like I said about the timing with honors, when it says what is your the dates of the involvement, put the very first date to the very last date. Make sure that you put that on there. You don't have to list the activity annually, because that will just sort of occupy spaces where you can put other things.
Yeah. So that means like if you're doing track and field and that's just in the spring, then the first date of involvement is when you first started, and maybe spring of your freshman year, and the last date, if you know you're going to be doing it this spring of your senior year, your last date of involvement would be then. So it would include multiple years, but we do understand that it's just in the spring.
And it's okay if you don't have all 6 activities filled out. We don't expect every student to be involved in 6 or more activities. We're really looking for the depth of your involvement in these activities. Have you been involved since 9th grade or since 10th grade? I think that that's really important for us to understand, what you're committed to and how involved you are with certain activities.
Yeah. I would also say that in the activity section is where we see a lot of acronyms, and
Just know them.
yeah, we don't. Like maybe people know some, but you don't want to take that risk. You want it to be, that any person could read your application and understand what's going on. So just remember to enter it in as full of the sentence as possible. And another thing about that is that, in the activity section, you have that place where you can put the description, you can describe your involvement, you can put any achievements and positions held.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a bunch of different places, a bunch of different information you can put there. And I would say the important thing is to try not to repeat information between those different sections. So if you are kind of like describing your involvement and you say, I was the captain of the team, and then for the position held, you put captain, and for achievement, you put like became captain. You see that 3 times, and we see them all in a row. So, try to look at how you can kind of vary that up, right? You talk about different parts of your involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Really describe your activity well, so that we can sort of picture you doing that activity.
Yeah, use complete sentences.
Yes,
While
please.
doing that, please. But I also want to mention that these activities don't have to be traditional activities that you do after school, like being on, your student yearbook or something like that. If you take care of siblings after school and you have other responsibilities at home, feel free to put that in there as well. That is an activity, and we do consider that as an activity when we're evaluating your application. That's important to us.
Yeah, I would also say that if you don't have 6 activities, that's fine. We think it's really important that you're involved in a meaningful way in the activities that you're in. And it's, we'll see that through reading your description of the activity and your involvement.
Yeah.
So kind of related to an activity, work experience, which can be another type of activity.
Right.
So this is another section where you can enter up to 4 jobs. Do you guys have any advice for this section?
I think with that, you can put volunteer work, you can put babysitting. It doesn't have to be a formalized job where you worked for a company or you worked in a shop or something like that. I mean, jobs can be that you're the local lawnmower of your neighborhood or something like that. Those all show your commitment and drive to make ends meet for your family and to help your family out. So you can definitely put those down as well. It doesn't have to be an official job that you put on your resume up here.
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, I think it's really important to put the employer information on there. So if you had an internship or you worked for an actual company, definitely put that company's name in that section. But if you're, babysitting or kind of you're self-employed because you are the neighborhood, lawnmower kid, then that's totally fine. You can put your own name because you're essentially self-employed, and we'll see that and we'll understand that. Kind of touching upon what Tara also mentioned about helping your family make ends meet and things like that. And if you are holding a part-time job because of that, whether it's on the weekends or after school, please explain that in that section. There is room for you I think the question is something like, what do you use your earnings, or what do you put your earnings toward?
Yeah.
You can be honest and just explain in that section if you're helping your family pay the bills, or if you are saving up for college. I mean, those are all very good explanations.
Yeah. And I'd also really like to reemphasize your point about filling out the employer field. So again, when we're asking who your employer is, that's not your manager's name, that's not your boss's name, that's the name of the company and or yourself, if you're self-employed. So if you're babysitting, you are still self-employed, because that is, you aren't like hired by a company.
And it's okay if you don't have work experience. If you go home and you cook and you do your homework and you help your siblings and there's other things that you're doing, that's fine. Or, maybe you're involved in a lot of extracurricular activities and you're a leader in those, it's fine not to have work experience. So don't panic if you don't have anything.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to a part that I know you guys probably have a lot of questions about, the essays and short answers. So actually, I have a question. Let me find it real fast. Before we were talking about using complete sentences, and for the question, what are your favorite books and or movies, is it okay to list, or should they still be using complete sentences?
It's definitely fine to list. So if you have multiple favorite books or movies that you want to share with us, it's definitely okay to put a hyphen or a comma or semicolon or something, so that we know that these are separate lists. Don't just kind of list them all out without any character spacing in between, or else it'll be really difficult for us to understand what you're saying. But it is fine to list. You don't have to explain why you like, the Harry Potter series. I know we use that example a lot, but it's true.
I think it's because we all like it.
That is also true.
Okay. Let me see, which actually, so some people have been asking about how informal it is to be, how informal can you be, especially in the short answers where you only have 225 characters, not a lot of space. How informal is it okay to be?
This is our way to get to know you. So going back to the lists of the books, you don't need to be super academic or in these lists. We want to know the true you. You don't want to speak too informally in these. This is still a writing sample that is going to come to us here at QuestBridge and then go off to the colleges. But you want to strike a good balance between letting us know what your personality is and not going down maybe the overly academic route if that isn't you.
Yeah, and we'll see that throughout your application too. So we'll know if it sounds unnatural or it reads a little bit unnatural.
Yeah, I feel like the short answers are really hard because it's such a short amount of space,
right,
that when you first write out the answer, it's definitely over 225 characters, and then you have to cut down. So it really shows your ability at writing concisely, but also as you keep cutting down, the tone can become more forced, not as natural, and maybe it sounds a lot different than how you would normally write an essay. So, I feel like once you cut it down, try to go back and look for that and see if it flows well with everything else you write. But I would say the short answers are definitely where you can show us a little bit more of your personality as well.
I agree.
Yeah, and especially the longer short answers. So this year we have 2 short answers that are a little bit longer than the 225 limit. So that's a great way for us to see your personality, for you to showcase who you are and highlight some things that we might not see anywhere else in your application.
Yeah.
And I would say, as far as we've talked about writing that Harry Potter as your favorite book, we've had college match recipients who have talked about loving Justin Bieber for their music.
Right.
Write out something that is actually true for you. And I wouldn't worry, especially for that first section, I think people can get caught up a lot on how intellectual they seem. And I think we understand that you're a high school student applying to college. We get that your favorite book might not be War and Peace. We understand that. So try to be.
That's great.
Yeah,
it's true. But just try to be honest to yourself.
And there's no right or wrong answer. I think that's kind of the point that we're trying to make here, is that don't feel like you have to write in a way to impress us or impress the admissions officers at any one of our partner colleges. They really want to get to know you. So just be as, again, authentic as you can with your responses.
Going back to punctuation though, make sure that you proofread those. I know that most everyone is very focused on editing and proofreading essays, and they ask people to edit and proofread them and get help. Do the same with your short answers. Just make sure that there is punctuation, that you're capitalizing what you need to do, and that you've edited them, at least read through them once or twice.
We do have another question related to these short answers because they are hard.
That's true. It is true.
And it is when answering the short answer questions, since we are limited on word count, how in depth do you want the answers to be? So I know a lot of students might be wondering, do you just need to give the answer or do you need to explain why? And from my personal perspective, and you guys can correct me if you feel differently, I would say I want to hear a little bit about why. And I know it's hard to do that in essentially one sentence, but try to throw that in a little bit, especially with the books and movies, that might be pretty hard to do, but with the other answers, you could definitely do it, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about like the larger essays, the 500 and the 800 word ones. Anything that you like or don't like seeing?
I'll let you go first.
I think that if you are writing your essay in a Word document and you're copying and pasting it over into the text box, please look at the application proof. I know we said and mentioned the application proof many times throughout this QuestCast today, but it's really important because copy and pasting from a Word document onto the application isn't always straightforward. There could be like spacing issues or things that are cut off at the very end and might not look the way that it looked in the Word document. So please make sure that the spacing between paragraphs is there. I think that's one thing that we see a lot is the essay looking like one huge chunk of text, even though you meant it to be, 3 different paragraphs. But because of cutting and pasting, that got lost in the formatting. So please take a look at that, the application proof, and make sure that the essay looks exactly the way that you want it to. And I don't know if Erin want to touch upon this a little bit more because I know how you feel about it, but when it comes to like separating the paragraphs, there's no way to indent on the application itself, so you can't press tab and have the paragraph kind of indent. So you'll have to hit return a couple times for the new line break to show.
Yeah, this is a big pet peeve of mine. To be honest, I feel like there's nothing worse than opening an essay and it appears as one paragraph, even though you have multiple paragraphs in there, it appears as one huge page of text. That's really overwhelming for me as a reader. It really is difficult to read through a whole page of text with no breaks in between. I would say that you have 2 options. I think tab doesn't work, so you can't make indents with tab, but you can go and you could add 5, 6 spaces, just pressing space at the beginning of each paragraph. One thing that I personally really like to see is double spacing between paragraphs so that there's a complete line between each paragraph.
Yeah.
I think visually that makes it a lot easier for the reader to read it.
Absolutely.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. One of the things that I have seen in past essays is people go and use the thesaurus a lot, or so it seems, and so there'll be sentences and sentences of really large words that didn't show up anywhere else in the application. It just all of a sudden it's in the essay. So be natural. I know we said that about the short answers, but be natural. Give it your best shot. Make this some of your best writing. But best writing doesn't necessarily mean using words that you wouldn't normally use in other pieces of writing. So be careful of using the thesaurus too often when you're writing.
It's pretty evident when you're using it a lot. It really is, and
it makes it difficult to read.
Yeah.
It makes it really
it takes
difficult
us
to read.
twice or 3 times as long to go through that essay. So that's
if you're using a word that you don't know because you had to look it up, chances are we're not very familiar with the word, and we're going to struggle to understand the meaning of your essay. I would also say with formatting, italics and bold doesn't work. Underline doesn't work. So again, that's something you want to double check, and you won't be able to use that when you're copying and pasting over. So have some backup plan for how you want to emphasize those words for that text.
Yeah, I think spacing is probably your best option with that. Like
just using quotation marks.
Yeah.
Something else to help it stand out.
Right.
Or writing in a way that it stands out by itself.
And I know we mentioned this earlier in our presentation today, but in terms of your essay, making sure that it's focused on yourself, right? So we have another QuestCast all about essay tips, so you can look at that if you haven't already. but make sure that it is really focused on your story and what you want to share about yourself to us and to the admissions officers at our partner colleges.
So we have a question here about the essay and about the style in which the essay is written. And the question is, would an informal essay style work better than a formal essay that still delivers the gist of what you're saying? Or is a formal essay better? Is it a preferred writing style, but most essay examples for applications have a more informal trend?
I think it depends on what you mean by formal and informal. If you're thinking about using the word I or whatever, like definitely do that. You can refer to yourself. I know that in a lot of papers that you write in high school, you're probably not allowed to use the word I. You have to write in the third person, but don't feel like that you need to do that for any of the essays on our application.
I would say that as far as informality goes, swearing is inappropriate, especially within the context. It's just an application for top colleges, and it's not appropriate.
Yeah. There are ways that you can get around it.
Yeah.
Like without using swear words. Yes.
Yeah.
I would also say that if you tend to be a more formal person in your writing, don't change your style to make it informal. So I think we're just going back to the same thing that I think we all said earlier is be true to you and be natural. So if you are a formal, when you write, you're quite formal in the words that you choose, don't change that style.
Yeah. I would say that I've seen lots of very successful essays written in many different ways. So some people take different creative risks. Some people kind of use more of this like storyline with different quotations from people, like telling that story. Some people write it in a more formal way, and I've seen many successful essays written in many ways, and I think that's why this question is so hard to answer.
Yeah,
and we don't have a preference as to how you approach your essay, whether how creative it is or how formal it is. I mean, it's really, again, like you should write for yourself and not to please us or any of the admissions officers.
When you are writing your essays, if you remember that when you're ranking colleges or you're applying to college, you're applying to multiple colleges. So if you, in your essay, write about your dream college and you state their name, it might turn off the other ones that you're applying to as well. So I would avoid saying any of the college names just so that your college essay can be used for multiple purposes.
Yeah, we actually have a question here that I want to tie into that, because the question is, what part of the application did the university see, if any?
They see everything.
All of it.
Yes, everything. From the first to the last page. Everything that you fill out is what they will see. So that's why we've been, reiterating certain things that we want you to pay attention to, because we want you to demonstrate and, kind of present yourself in the best possible way and have the most polished application.
And that's why Tara's point about not mentioning specific colleges is so relevant, because if you mention that college X is the college of your dreams, and that's why you're applying there, it won't make sense if later on other colleges are seeing your application.
Right. And a place to do that, though, would be in like a school-specific supplement.
Yes.
If that school requires a common application and they have a school-specific supplement, you can definitely make that more specific to that college. But otherwise, for the QuestBridge application, please avoid doing that.
And our partners partner with us because of our application. It's one of the many reasons they partner with us, but because our application has those additional information sections, the essays are written or the essay prompts are written in such a way that we really can get to know you as students, and the partners appreciate that. So in those additional information sections where you're writing maybe a little bit more about your life, they're gonna read all of it. So be sure that I'm going to continue to say edit and proofread those as well. But just remember, they're going to see everything from page 1 all the way to the end.
So besides like the essays and short answers, those sections, there are a couple other spots in the application where you can talk about your most meaningful activity, or you can talk about your career goals. And I, for one, really like it when you fill that out, because although those are optional, it really shows like your commitment to the application, how much you want to share, that you've really invested time in it. So those are optional, but
nice.
I'd recommend that you fill them out.
Yeah.
And you don't have to fill out all 3 academic interests or career interests. If you only have one, that's fine with us. You're not tied to anything that you're putting down in
You're
your
not committing
application.
to
Right. So the college that you're going to won't look back at your QuestBridge application and say like, oh, you wanted to, major in computer science. Like, what are you doing? So you're not tied to that, but it's really nice for us to have a more complete picture of what you're interested in and what you hope to do and what you're passionate about. And hopefully your short answers and other areas of the application will, echo that as well.
I know we've also been getting a lot of questions, I feel like recently, from students who are wondering if they can use the same ideas from their main biographical essay to the short essay, the one that's the 500-word one, if they can use the same ideas. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I would say take advantage of the fact that you have space to tell us more about who you are. So if you use the same ideas twice, it's basically just repeating the essay twice. So you're missing an opportunity to elaborate on your personality for us.
And I think it's okay if you mention an idea in one of the short answers that you want to elaborate on in your biographical or in your second essay. That's totally fine. But I think to have both of the longer essays about the same topic probably won't serve you that well.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's kind of disappointing to see that you had two opportunities to show us different sides, different parts about your life, and you just talked about the same thing. Yeah. It's a wasted opportunity, really. Okay. I feel like that kind of brings us through the end of the application. Do you guys have any other points you want to add, or we can jump to some more questions? Yes, jump to questions. Okay, so we're going to do our best to answer these. I know a lot of your questions are specifically about how we evaluate applications. And as I said before, we're not actually able to talk about that today. What we're able to talk about is how you can make your application stand out when you're evaluating it. So slightly different. But this one question is at the top. It's been at the top for a while. And is there a part of the application that you focus on the most when determining acceptance? And are there any parts that are more important than others?
It's a holistic review. So just as we send page 1 all the way to page 25 to our partners, we're reading it from front to back and sometimes over again to determine whether or not you all become finalists. We want as many of you to become finalists as possible. And so we'll read and read again, but there isn't a certain section that we're really focusing on. At least when I read, I don't focus on only one section.
Right, because every section touches on a different part of who you are, right? There's more information about your background or your family or your family's income. So it's really hard to say that there's one piece of it that is truly like the most important above all.
Yeah, and that like holistic review means that it's to your advantage. It means that you won't be knocked out because of one thing. So it's a positive thing overall, even though it means right now we aren't able to give a clear answer. Right?
I know that's frustrating, but it's to your advantage.
Even, I would add to that though that a lot of the things on your application are already predetermined. Your family's income is predetermined, the grades you've received so far, the test scores you've received so far, you can't change those. What you can change is your essay and your writing and how well you write throughout that entire application, the grammar you use. So I think that is, if there's one way that you can make a difference in what you put into your application, that's where you can really focus.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we said before is having a very polished application with a proper punctuation and grammar and spelling, that can really make a big impression on us when we're reading your application.
In the financial section, when you are inputting those numbers, I know that oftentimes we'll go back and proofread all the punctuation and the essays over and over again, but also as students, that's probably what you're doing. But make sure you go back at least one time through the numbers that are input in the financial and the household section, because oftentimes we'll see an application that it probably meant to put like 35,000, but they accidentally added an extra zero and it made it 350,000. And you don't want to make that mistake. So make sure that you're going through and double checking those numbers. So if someone in your family is helping you, that's fantastic. Then you can be the person going back through and making sure that those numbers are correct or vice versa.
One question about testing real fast. So some of you might have taken the ACT recently, on September 12th. And you're going to just address real fast, whether we can include those scores or not. So my understanding is that the scores will come out by this Friday, but not the writing part, the other part. So you should put those scores into your applications, the ones that you have up to that point.
Yes.
Everything you have.
Right, and I don't know for sure if it's this Friday
That
or
is
not.
my understanding.
That's
I'm
okay.
waiting
That's
for your
fine as
states
well.
that
Yes, but yeah, if you have them before the application is due, please go ahead and put them in. You can always, upload a copy of your test score report after you submit your application as well.
Wait, can you emphasize that again?
Okay, you can upload a copy of your test score report after you submit your application. So if you have an September ACT, for example, and you get the score, a little bit later than our application deadline, you can go back and upload it as a document, and we will see that when we're reading your application.
Yeah. So that'll be on the Manage page after you submit the application. On the Manage page, you can upload another test score report. But if you do have some of those sections, the scores for them, go ahead and type them in.
Yes.
That'll be really,
And it's okay if you don't have writing.
Yes, that's
we
fine.
said that earlier, but I just want to emphasize, it's okay if you don't have writing. We understand that.
As far as test scores received after our deadline, we're unfortunately not able to consider them in our review. That's because we get started reading so quickly. But what you can do in your application, you should check that you are taking a test score a test in the future, and then you can send those scores directly to the colleges that you're applying to. So they'll be able to see it, and they'll include it in their review of your whole application.
Yeah, so if you're taking the SAT or ACT or subject test in October, you're going to have to send them directly to the colleges. We won't be able to review them for the college match.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question here that's really interesting because I don't think I've ever heard this question before. And that is for QuestBridge regular decisions, not the match, regular decision. Will colleges evaluate you among QuestBridge applicants for a limited amount of QuestBridge student spots, or will you be evaluated and compared among all applicants of that college? So that's for regular decision. Is there, does each college have a certain number of QuestBridge students they'll take, or are they reviewing you in their larger pool?
I think the processes differ from each college to each college. Some schools will kind of roll you into the bigger pool. Some schools might look at your application amongst all the other QuestBridge students. I mean, it's really difficult to say because we have 36 partners, and each partner, as you can tell if you've looked on our website, the application requirements, they each have different requirements and a different way of doing things. So I wouldn't, count on it one way or the other.
That's great.
It's a good
Nothing
question.
I've really ever thought about before.
No.
Yeah. But I would say generally, it's not that each school doesn't necessarily have a quota of students that they're trying to meet, and it probably varies per year, the amount of students that they're accepting. It's really, each year the applicant pool is really different, and so that's just going to impact it. So there's not a clear answer there about that. Okay. So thinking about Common App essays, do students need to complete the Common App essays before they're notified whether they're a QuestBridge finalist or not? And also, I would add, related to the Common App essays, can you use the same essays from your QuestBridge application?
Well, the supplemental materials are due, and it depends on what school, actually. It really depends on the school that you put on your rankings list, because some of them may not even ask for the Common Application.
That's true. Right. That's a great point.
So you make sure that you're checking before you go off and complete an entire Common Application. You may not need it. So first of all, do your research and look at the application requirements. I know some of them say you can go ahead in the application requirements themselves. They say you can use the same essay on the answer. And some of them say you can't. But Vanessa knows more about the partners than.
Yeah, so some schools will take your QuestBridge application and that's all you need to fill out, but a lot of schools do require you to submit the Common Application. So again, it's really important that you're looking on our website at each partner college's app requirements to figure out what really is needed as far as the supplementary material is concerned. I mean, we encourage you to start working on those requirements early on. Just even if you don't match, you can always apply regular decision, and they'll need those materials from you at that point too. So it doesn't hurt, I think, to get started early. Especially if you're applying to multiple schools and each school has a supplement that you're going to need to work on. So it's going to be really important that you're looking at each college's requirements and figuring out what they need. As Tara said, some schools will allow you to use both essays as part of the common application, some will only let you use one of them. So you're going to have to plan ahead and think about, which schools you're applying to, what their requirements are, and kind of keep a running list and track all of the materials that you need to submit in order to have a complete application.
Yeah, and I would also add that when you're looking for those application requirements, you should be doing that on our website,
Right.
because that's where they're all listed. So, application requirements for the college match might be different than regular application requirements for that school's early decision program. So you should be looking on our website. We have a page called College Requirements, and you can find everything you need to there for each college specifically. So that's I think one of the most important pages on our website.
Yeah.
Really encourage you to check it out sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
We have another question, and this one's pretty simple, but it's how many scholars are picked? How many students become finalists?
That depends every year. Depends on how many applications we receive. Last year, we, I think, had 4,180 finalists, if I remember that correctly. So we're not looking to fill a certain number of, finalists, seats, or, however you want to consider that. We don't have like a minimum or maximum of students that we're looking for. It's really the most qualified students who have applied this year.
As many as are qualified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And I think the same goes for the match too. It varies per year. We have no way really of predicting how many students will be matched. It depends on how strong the applicant pool is. It depends on what the colleges are looking for.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have no clear answer.
Yeah.
But okay. Let me see. We have one question here related back to the essays, and it might be difficult to answer, but let's try. What types of things should you not mention in your biographical essay? And I'll kick this off because I know what I don't like to see. What I don't like to see is students talking about a difficult situation that they've been through and ending the essay on a negative tone. I want to see how you've overcome. Or maybe you're still going through that struggle, but I want to see that you're hopeful at the very, very least. And to see an essay that's ended in a very negative way, or that speaks really poorly of someone, it doesn't speak well to your character. We want to see students who are able to grow and move past these obstacles. So that's something I would not include in a biographical essay.
I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely keep a positive tone. Show that you are hopeful and that what you've overcome or what you're going through, but definitely in a positive way.
Yeah, I think with that, you're going to have to leave space in your essay to do that, right? So you're going to, when you're writing your essay, make sure that at the very end or somewhere throughout that you're leaving enough room for us to see that about you and not just focus on the facts that happened and maybe what happened in the past, but really think about how you're going to carry these lessons that you've learned and hopefully grow from them, or kind of how they change who you are now that you're a senior in high school and going off to college.
Yeah, I would also say if there's something that you are thinking about writing about, or maybe you've started writing, hopefully you've started writing about, where maybe you're still working through your feelings on the matter, or you're still, you haven't really resolved it internally. Maybe you're still frustrated about something or upset about something. Maybe that's not the best thing to talk about. It's okay to talk about something else if you're not sure that you can write about it in a way that will display your character in a positive manner.
I'd say also avoid being disrespectful. So if you have a very strong opinion one way or the other about anything, it doesn't really matter what it is, just avoid being disrespectful because you don't know who is on the other end of that application reading it, and you don't know what their opinions are. So you don't necessarily want to offend people in coming across as not being open-minded and having a very strong opinion. You can have a strong opinion in a respectful manner, that's fine, but be sure that you're being respectful.
Yeah, I think that some students have questions about whether you can talk about religion or another part of your identity that's really important to you. And I think your answer to that is perfect. Yes, you're certainly welcome to do as long as you do it in a respectful manner. And as long as anyone from any background can read your essay and still think that you're a great person.
Yeah. Right, and I was just going to add that we've seen a lot of essays written about religion or other parts of who who you are and your identity that have worked out really well. So there is definitely a way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. One other question I think is really great about a section of the application we haven't really talked about is about that additional information section. So what type of information is typically given by most applicants in the additional information section at the end of the application, and how can we use that section to make our application stand out more? It's a great question. I love the way you worded it.
Yes.
Because yes, how can
Very
you use that section to make your application stand out more? I'll say, I feel like this is used very differently by a lot of people.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we created that with that in mind, knowing that, you know, everyone comes from such a different background that there will be areas that you will want to emphasize, maybe that someone else won't touch upon. So we kept it really open for that reason. But, you know, I often see a lot of students who might want to explain something about their academic record. Maybe they didn't, you know, do so well in 9th or 10th grade, but their grades really picked up in 10th or in 11th grade, and, you know, they took more rigorous classes and they learned from, you know, their mistakes or whatever the situation is. And so I think that's a great place where you can explain that if this applies to you.
Yeah, especially if maybe there was something going on during that time where we had lower grades. If you were ill, someone in your family was ill, something was going on. Tell us about that, because that will impact how we view those lower grades in a positive way. I would also add to, like, any information that you're providing us here should be more of an explanation, not an excuse.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. An explanation, not an excuse.
With that positive tone.
Yeah.
A positive tone. I've seen it used really well to explain their passions sometimes, where here's my career interest and here's why, but then later on they explain really why they're extremely interested. A student's extremely interested in one particular career or something, maybe one of the activities. Maybe they explain, like, this is, you know, how I got really involved in playing the violin or something like that, just to give a little bit more insight on you as a person.
I would also say if you have a household situation that's complicated, you might have already tried to explain that in the household section, but if it's really complicated, we would appreciate another explanation.
Yeah.
If there's anything else we need to know to really understand the financial situation of your family, please explain it there. Specifically, any, like, medical, unreimbursed medical expenses, explain that and give us a specific dollar amount.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to understand what a large medical expense is unless we have a dollar amount to attach that to.
Very true.
So
That's the bulk of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you're talking about different things, you can number them, you know, separate them out. I think that's going to be
Do
done.
the double spacing.
Yeah,
That always works. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. I know we have a lot of other questions here, but a lot of them are related to how we evaluate the applications, not necessarily how you can make yours really stand out. But with that being said, do you guys, final question here, do you guys have, like, a favorite part of the, you know, of the application when you're reading it, like a favorite part, or maybe do you ever, like, remember an essay that, like, really stood out to you and what made it special?
I think the short answers, when, you know, written in a way that showcases who you are and, you know, lets us see your personality, can really make an impact, because these are there's, you know, a lot of rapid fire questions and you only have a short amount of space to answer them, but sometimes being really concise and being able to answer those questions maybe in a funny way, or, you know, something like that, where your personality really shines through. I think that often strikes very memorable for me.
I would say just in that, moving in from that to the essays, just in that personality or that funny way that where you can really grasp onto, I can picture what this person's personality is going to be like. I think that for me, I can't think of an essay off the top of my head, but I can certainly think of essays where I thought, wow, I really want to sit down and talk to this person. So.
Yeah. I would say some of the applications I've read where the teacher recommendations are just so strong. And I know that's something that you guys don't have a lot of control over, at least at this point. But I think that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I can remember some teacher recommendations that were just so so overwhelmingly strong in favor of the student and really showed a lot more about the student, especially if the student was maybe more reserved and how they, talked about themselves. That made a big difference.
Yeah.
So if you still have time to talk to your teacher, tell them more about yourself.
Yeah. And if your teacher can point out something that is reflected somewhere in your application, that is really strong too. And we'd love to see that as well.
Okay, with that, we're going to wrap up. Final advice, put everything from your application into Word, check it for punctuation, grammar. It really will make a difference.
Look at the application proof, yes.
Exactly. Again, that's on the review page. You can see that there. And best of luck with
Yeah,
your
good
National
luck.
College Match applications.
Can't wait to read them.
Yes.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thanks so much for joining us today.